Saving the Coral Reefs, an analysis of a holistic environmental movement by Lindsay Cruson. On this slide, you will see pictured to the left a portion of the Kumalipo Hawaiian creation chant. In this, you can see that according to Hawaiian tradition, the coral polyp is the first organism that was ever created, and this makes the coral polyp our ancestor, and it is our kuleana to protect this precious ecosystem. In addition to the cultural significance the coral reef has on the local communities, there are many other benefits that it provides to everyone. Coral reefs provide a nursery for our fish and a home for a wide variety of marine life. Here in Hawaii, due to isolation, there are over 1,250 unique species that are only found on our reefs. The coral reef system supports all life, and it is an essential building block of the food chain and a source of new medicines, while also supplying us with nearly half of the Earth's oxygen and absorbing nearly 1/3 of the carbon dioxide generated from burning fossil fuels. By 2030, over 90% of the coral reefs will be threatened, and if action isn't taken soon, nearly all reefs will be threatened by 2050. This threatens food security to local communities, income from coral reef-related tourism, and the fishing industries. I argue that the Coral Reef Alliance, CORAL, is a social movement using the master frame of a holistic environmental movement. This professionalized form of organization authors peer-reviewed research and creates cutting-edge solutions that are implemented and introduced to the public using grassroots strategy under the collective framework of hope despite despair to adapt to the changing environment of opportunity of the coronavirus pandemic successfully. In my literature review, I collected information from books and peer-reviewed studies concerning environmentalism and coral reef conservation. I learned that the industrialization of humankind expanded the anthropocentric view of people to see nature as something separate and as a resource to fuel economic sustainability. The pioneers of the modern environmentalism movement caused a shift in the responsibility of caring for nature. The local timber became the property of the United States Forest Service, local water was diverted to federal irrigation projects, and local land became managed by the Bureau of Land Management. Activists in the 1960s and 70s used grassroots tactics to disrupt the status quo, and Congress responded by enacting weak regulatory legislation. The environmentalism movement has been focused on resourcism. Resourcism represents the commoditization of nature. Since the underlying ideology views nature as a slave to humans, the main perception is to value nature in monetary terms, and this has led to the rise of the paradigm of ecosystem services. The United Nations has put together the technical assessment of experts rather than government officials in creating the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change in 1988. Its purpose was to assist policymakers and offer strategies to respond to climate change. The Millennium Ecosystem Report of 2005 showed that the degradation of ecosystems threatens humanity's very existence and will continue to do so in future generations. Globally, coral reef tourism is one of the most significant examples of nature-based tourism from a single ecosystem, generating $35.8 billion every year through tourism alone. Net economic benefits of Hawaiian coral reef ecosystems are estimated at $360 million a year, with an overall asset value estimated at nearly $10 billion. Tourism is the least significant threat to the reef system, other than climate change, pollution, and overfishing. It can help some threats by providing financial and social motivations for sustainable management. In addition to the economic benefits of the coral reef in Hawaii, the coral reefs provide critical services, including commercial, recreational, and subsistence fishing. The reefs in the main Hawaiian Islands are starting to show significant decline because of overfishing and pollution. An example is Honolulu Bay in Maui, Hawaii, where between 1994 and 2006, the coral coverage dropped from 42% to 9%. Rising sea temperatures and ocean acidification is a threat to the coral reef. Large bleaching events are correlated to elevated sea surface temperatures. The coral reef is an ecosystem made up of colonies of coral that support a wide variety of marine life. These coral polyps and their algae roommates are under threat from rising ocean water temperatures and pollution. This literature review looked at the history of environmentalism and the ideology its frame is built on as nature as a commodity and its value as a resource. I also learned the critical services these coral reef colonies provide and the industries and social systems in society that are threatened by coral reefs' decline. While the scientists are watching the rising sea surface temperatures and policymakers have access to the data, it is the environmental social movements motivating new legislation and action. They serve as the voice of the people as well as an extension of the programs the leaders have provided. They support legislation to change practices that exploit or threaten this vulnerable ecosystem. Their elevated voice will spread faster if the negative narratives around coral reef death are balanced with empowering narratives of hope. The global collective mind of society is social distancing now due to the severe public crisis of the coronavirus pandemic. The relationship humans are having with nature is shifting. The very way the social movements is interpreting this dynamic shift in all of the environments of opportunity. The rise of the industrialized and materialistic paradigm over the last 200 years has turned nature into a source for the economy, profit, production, and consumption. The ideology of nature serving mankind ignited a collective response in the form of environmentalism that serves as a hopeful remedy. When individuals join their voices and organize action, they work together to meet their goals and form what is called a social movement organization. The activists and organizations working within a social movement are called social movement actors. When the activist passion for change is ignited and the organized actions of the social movement organization raise awareness and shine a brighter light, exposing and defining the problem or situation, this is what is called the narrative practice. The social movement actors use a variety of tactics to influence politicians in the community while advocating for social and political change. When organizing, these individuals choose the type of their organization. This is an evolving process that changes as the movement grows. The way that an SMO chooses to make decisions determines what type of organizational form they use. The three types discussed are participatory democracy, which means there is no hierarchy or a democratic way of thinking or making decisions. Centralized, this means there is a hierarchy and a board of directors. And professionalized, this is when they have a paid staff that takes care of day-to-day activities and decision-making, and members usually pay a membership fee to support the cause. The narrative practice that helped form the SMO also helps build the framework that the SMO uses. Frames help the social movement actors define the problem by illuminating what is going on or what should be going on. Collective action frames are systems of meaning that diagnose a problem and define a prognosis and motivate action through the creation of a collective identity. The social movement builds momentum to achieve its goal of social change by using both the environment of opportunity model and the narrative practice to interpret it. The environment of opportunity model instructs the analysis to pay attention to structure and is an interactionist model grounded in developing conclusions about how these social movement actors understand and adapt to the context in which they exist. At the center of the model is a social movement actor or activist. They are in an evolving process of constructing narratives to understand changes in the environment of opportunity. The four spheres of opportunity are political, economic, cultural, and grassroots. The grassroots sphere is different from the previous three because it's a possible effect of them all. Dr. Hearn expanded her explanation of the environment of opportunity model, including three more features of the grassroots opportunity. Number one is the existence of an active interest and participation of members, non-members, and new members in a social movement or social movement organization. Number two is a popular public definition of grassroots mobilization as a legitimate outlet for political action. And number three is the availability of grassroots resources such as existing mobilizing structures which can be used to facilitate the mobilization of public support. Social movement organizations use strategy and tactics to express the message of their narrative and ignite action in other prospective members while advocating for social change. The frames that the movement adopts determine the range of tactics used and the types of strategy the movement focuses on. The methodology I used in my analysis is called a content analysis. The content I reviewed is the official website of the Coral Reef Alliance called www.coral.com. The website is user-friendly, and on the homepage is the About Us section. There I found the missions, values, and goals of the organization that guide them as they work together. In the Our Team tab, I found information that provided Coral's staff details, including senior leadership, program staff, and development staff, market and communications, and administration. The tab labeled Our Board gave information about the board of directors, and this includes professionals from many different industries. The What Do We Do section of the website provides links that give me information about the strategic approach of Coral. The analysis aimed to find indicators that Coral meets the criteria to be a social movement organization. I looked at the organization form, goals, and how they are interpreting the environment of opportunity with their choice of strategy, tactics, and framing. When reviewing the information on the website, I specifically looked for information that related to Hawaii and focused the analysis on the local area of Hawaii, all the Hawaii islands. The Coral Reef Alliance has a strategy of creating collaborative partnerships with people who are most connected to the coral reef environment. This includes local communities, fishermen, tourism industry, policymakers, and more. The organization uses cutting-edge science as a strategy, finding innovative ways to facilitate the evolution of the reefs. They work with local communities to create management programs that benefit both the inhabitants of the sea and land by reducing local stressors, providing workshops. These trainings give residents alternatives to overfishing, teaching them new skills to diversify their income. They are also helping lawmakers to feel more connected to the ocean reefs by creating virtual reality tours. In this August 2018 blog post, Looking to the Future with Virtual Reality, you can see that Dr. Richmond, a board member of Coral, partnered with Virtual Human Interaction Lab and created the virtual reality film called Coral Compass, Fighting Climate Change in Palau, an underwater VR film. The film was shown to the Palauan senators in an attempt to influence the trajectory of future laws and regulations that affect the coral reef. This strategy was successful, and evidence of this is demonstrated by the actions of those senators who introduced initiatives to reduce the number of people allowed at popular tourist areas and made commitments to protect the coral reef. When using this virtual reality film as a strategy, Coral was creating a way for these decision makers to feel connected to nature and see that we are not separate from nature but a part of it. One of the underwater filmmakers, Ogle, said, "When you put the headset on, you feel immersed, and that's really what drives this experience as far as creating attitude and behavior changes for the coral reef." As seen in this blog post from October 2020, Coral's program manager on the Hawaii island, Erica Perez, is adapting her strategy due to the coronavirus crisis. The volunteer team that was supposed to be training and collecting water samples on South Kahala coast as part of a research project was put on hold due to the crisis. This blog shows that Erica is taking advantage of the regulatory exemptions that Coral receives from the state to personally access beaches with another longtime volunteer to collect samples. This exemption allows her to collect water quality samples that will help the scientists to champion water quality issues on Hawaii Island. Erica is also converting what was an in-person training program to an online platform so that volunteers can train at home and be prepared to participate in sampling when it's safe. When looking at the Where We Work tab of the Coral Reef Alliance's website, in Hawaii, you can see that their focus is on Clean Water for Reefs initiative that has an emphasis on preventing land-based sources of pollution from entering streams and groundwater, which eventually lead to the ocean. They work alongside committees to develop science-based monitoring plans using citizen scientists to measure the ecological and socioeconomic benefits of improved wastewater pollution. By sharing their research and initiatives with the decision makers in the state and county, with the intention of influencing policy and regulations, this organization is meeting the criteria to be a social movement. Looking at the Facebook page for Coral Reef Alliance, you can see that since the coronavirus, they are focusing on fundraising, building hope, and also you can see on October 6th of 2020, there's a link to a news story about a young volunteer participant that's involved in a home plant growing program developed by a coral program coordinator in Maui County, Hawaii. At just 10 years old, Abby Rogers told her story. She said, "I really wanted to do things for the environment, but had not found a way to really help besides not using a straw or bringing my own bags to the store. My mom read about the Coral Project in the newspaper article and suggested it to me." The news article noted that the key to coral success is building strong local partnerships. The social movement actor Reef recognized the opportunity of people being available to become involved in the movement in a new way. Due to social distancing mandates requiring individuals to stay home and quarantine, people of every age look for ways to feel hopeful and give back to the community. Parents who are working outside of the home are now homeschooling their children and looking for resources to teach them about the effects of climate change on our oceans. Coral acted on this grassroots opportunity by creating collaborative partnership with Maui Nui Botanical Gardens, West Maui Ridge to Reef, and Down the Hatch, while providing at-home native plant kits to the community. Each kit includes equipment and seeds to grow 50 native plants and instructions on how to grow them. There is an option to borrow the needed pots, soil, and supplies from Coral if needed. Abby signed up for 3 kits and said it was so fun that she returned and signed up for 15 more kits. She is just one of 100 volunteers who signed up for this program and will supply the community with 900 fully grown plants. This project aims to save the coral reef from the sediment and nutrient pollution that occurs with storm water runoff. Coral began as a small group of scuba divers motivated to protect the coral reef. The frame was Corals in Crisis. Coral uses the master frame of resourcism and environmental sustainability to create the narrative that the coral reefs are an ecosystem worthy of this anthropocentric society's efforts to protect them. Coral's press kit for the media to use for articles notes that the coral reefs are one of the most diverse ecosystems on the planet and support the livelihoods of over 500 million people, with a global net worth to be $375 billion a year. When Coral includes the socioeconomic benefits of the coral reef and highlights the financial benefits of ecotourism to motivate policymakers, Coral is using the frame of resourcism to strategically influence regulations that will help save the coral reefs. Coral is balancing the bad news with messages of empowerment during the pandemic. This can be seen in the November 2020 eCurrent newsletter titled Finding Hope in Uncertain Times, written by Coral's executive director, Dr. Colton. By adapting to the changing environment of opportunity, Coral looks with hope to the future and to successfully motivate more action from the public, influencing decision makers to protect the precious coral reef system. As stated in the literature review, environmental social movements serve as the voice of the people as well as an extension of the programs the leaders have provided. In October 2020's blog post, Coral's program manager, Erica Perez, launched that volunteer team to regularly collect water samples. And this was developed with the intention to bring a more robust and consistent understanding of water quality issues across the Hawaii island and reduce some of the pressure on the Hawaii Department of Health. A narrative of a silver lining is being communicated in this article, balancing the frame of Corals in Crisis. Because there have been no tourists and very few locals wearing sunscreen and getting in the water samples collected during this time are creating a baseline for what minimum samples should consist of. When tourism reopens, this data can be used to compare the two. In this Twitter post from October 19th, 2020, Coral indicates that their primary goal is to save the coral reefs, utilizing the narrative of hope through the use of evolutionary adaptive research to develop the potential to reach their vision. The use of the narrative of hope is also further illustrated in the 25th anniversary statement appearing on the website, providing evidence that in 2019, the organization was prepared to evolve and alter their strategy and tactics to achieve a new goal of rallying the conservation community to save the coral reef at a global scale. On July 2019, in a peer-reviewed study, coral scientists showed evidence that the conservation efforts using adaptive reefscapes can help save the coral reef and help them adapt. This, coupled with the corals in crisis, caused the social movement decision makers to shift to a global coral reef conservation effort, using the information gathered in the study to balance the corals in crisis frame with a narrative of hope despite despair. In conclusion, Coral's use of strategy and tactics responding to the ever-changing environment of opportunity during the coronavirus have proven to be successful in motivating action. Not only has Coral contributed to the scientific research that is focused on saving the coral reef, but they also help build resilient communities and teach locals alternatives to overfishing for income. Not only does Coral meet the requirements to be a social movement organization, but it is shown that it is also part of an evolving holistic environmental movement that challenges the underlying ideology of anthropocentrism. Coral is participating in the environmental movement as a professionalized social movement organization focused on a mission to protect the coral reef. Their efforts not only help the coral reef evolve and adapt to the changing environment, but the individuals as well.